I've worked as a security guard for most of my life. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills. Gas stations, convenience stores, small shops, places where you're mostly just sitting around, keeping an eye on things. But when I saw the ad for a night shift at the local mall, I thought I'd finally stumbled on something better. The pay was good, better than anything I'd seen in years. The hours weren't bad either, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was just one building, and I figured it would be quiet and easy. How hard could it be? I could already imagine sitting back in the security office, watching the cameras, and walking around in a place that felt too big for the silence of the night. I applied immediately and got a call the next day. It was the manager, Mr. Hensley, asking if I could come in for an interview that afternoon. It seemed sudden, but I didn't question it. I needed the job, and the mall wasn't far from where I lived. I drove over, trying to shake the feeling that this was all happening too fast. Was the mall that desperate for a night guard? The interview was quick, almost rushed. Hensley asked about my experience, but it didn't feel like he was paying attention. He ran through the basics, check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, do hourly patrols. Nothing out of the ordinary. By the end of it, he looked at me and asked, "Can you start tonight?" That surprised me. Most places want time for paperwork or background checks, but I wasn't about to argue. "Sure," I said, trying not to sound too eager. He looked relieved. "Great. We're understaffed," he admitted, rubbing his temples like the day had been too long. "Last few guards didn't last. I hope you'll be different." His words gave me pause. What did he mean by that? But before I could ask, he handed me a key to the office and told me to report at 11 p.m. sharp. The quicker I started, the quicker I'd get paid, I told myself. I shook his hand, left the office, and went home to get a few hours of sleep before my shift. When I arrived at the mall, it was dark and deserted. The parking lot, which during the day was packed with cars, was almost entirely empty. A few scattered vehicles sat under the dim glow of the parking lights, but the space felt too big, too quiet. It made the building look like a sleeping giant, and for a second, I considered turning around and going home. Something felt wrong. I brushed it off as first-day nerves and walked up to the employee entrance. Mr. Hensley met me at the door. He didn't say much, just led me through the winding corridors to the security office, explaining the basic protocols again as we walked. The office itself was small, a cramped room at the back of the mall filled with screens displaying grainy footage from the cameras scattered around the building. "Check the cameras every 15 to 30 minutes, he reminded me. "Do your rounds, make sure nothing's out of place. The usual." He glanced at me before adding, "And keep an eye on the escalators in the play area. Things happen there sometimes." That last part made me pause. "Things happen?" He waved a hand dismissively. "Kids, mostly. Trying to sneak in or mess around after hours. You'll see." I nodded, though his tone made my skin crawl a little. He handed me a printed sheet of standard instructions, shook my hand again, and said, "Good luck. I'll see you in the morning." Once he left, I was alone. The silence of the empty mall settled over me like a heavy blanket. I took a seat in front of the monitors, flipping through the camera feeds. The escalators were still, the stores dark and empty. For a moment I relaxed. It was just a mall, nothing creepy about that. Just a big empty building. After a few minutes, I felt a presence behind me. I jumped, my heart pounding. There, standing just beside me, was a janitor. He grinned, clearly amused by my reaction. "Didn't mean to scare you, buddy," he said, his voice light. "You must be the new guy." I let out a nervous laugh, trying to shake off the tension. "Yeah, that's me. I didn't know there was a janitor here at night." He shrugged. "They always keep one of us around to clean up, make sure everything's ready for the next day." His tone turned a bit more serious. "Just make sure you follow the rules."
I
Carl
blinked.
was able to show his
The
true
rules?
genius, making major
mean the
developments and
instructions?
breakthroughs in his
He
side
handed me a
experiments,
crumpled piece of
most
paper,
notably
looking at me
developing
with
a
an
gasoline
unsettling
two-stroke
seriousness.
engine in 1879.
These aren't from the manager.
To earn more revenue,
These are the rules
he
you'll
also
need
began
if you
to
want to make
patent
it
his
through the night.
inventions, such as his engine
I
speed
unfolded the
regulation
paper,
system,
half expecting
ignition
some kind
via
of
a
joke,
battery system,
but the list of
spark
rules it
plug,
contained was
carb
anything
layer,
but funny.
clutch, gear shift,
Rules
and
to
a
keep
water
you safe at
radiator.
night.
With these designs,
Rule 1.
Carl was not only
Check the
getting
security
closer to
cameras
achieving
every
his
15
dream
to
of a
30
horseless
minutes,
carriage,
but don't
they
stare at the
also
footage
allowed
for too
him to
long.
add more products that he could
Rule
sell
2.
from his business.
Never look directly
However,
at the mannequins
the
after
business
midnight.
wasn't going as well
if the
as he had
mannequins
hoped.
change positions,
You see,
leave the area
production
immediately.
costs from Carl's venture
I stared
had
at the
risen
list,
so
my
much,
gut
the
tightening
banks
with
demanded
discomfort.
that it be incorporated.
You're serious?
This forced him to
The
associate with
janitor's
other
grin had
investors
vanished.
and eventually
I'm
turn
warning
his
you,
business
follow
into
the
a joint
rules or
stock
you'll end up
company
like the
in
last guy.
1882.
I tried
At
to laugh
the
it
end,
off.
Carl was left
You
with
mean
only
the last
5%
guard?
of his company's shares,
He nodded,
and
his
thus
eyes
was
cold.
downgraded from his
He
position.
quit after one night.
To make matters worse,
Okay.
his ideas were no
I
longer
stuffed
taken
the
into
paper into my
account
pocket
when the
without
company
checking the
designed
rest of the
new
list,
products.
chuckling
In
nervously.
fact, he had no say
Well, I'm going to make
whatsoever
my
in the
first
company
round.
anymore.
The janitor
Frustrated
stepped
and
aside,
hurt with this
giving me a
arrangement,
long look
Carl
before
packed
saying,
up his things and
"Take
left the
care."
corporation the
I
following
nodded
year.
and left the office, but his words stuck with me. Something about his tone, his look. It felt off, like he was genuinely afraid. But I wasn't going to let some weird list of rules mess with my head.
Leaving his company
just
came
past
as a
midnight
hard
when I
blow
started
for
my
Carl,
patrol.
but the disappointment made
The
him
mall was
even more
eerie at night,
determined to
much
be
more so
successful.
than I expected.
His longtime
The
passion
dim
for
lighting
bicycles
cast long,
would bring
twisting
him to
shadows
Max
along the
Rose
tiled
and
floors.
Friedrich Wilhelm,
Every
two
sound
men
felt
who owned a
amplified.
bicycle repair shop
My
in
footsteps
Mannheim.
echoing off the
Together,
walls.
they established
The hum of the
Benz and
fluorescent
C
lights,
and focused
the
on
distant
manufacturing
creaks and groans of
industrial
the building
machines
settling.
and stationary gas engines.
As I made my way down one of
Unlike
the main
Carl's
hallways,
previous venture,
I tried to
this
focus
one
on the
started
task at
pretty
hand.
well and became quite
The mall
profitable
wasn't
within a
huge,
short period
but it
of
was
time.
big enough to need regular
With
patrols.
steady income pouring in,
There were plenty
and a
of stores
staff
to
of
check,
25
some of them
people,
abandoned,
Benz
some locked
finally
up,
directed his
with
main
displays
focus
peeking
toward
out
his
from the
lifelong
darkness
dream,
behind their glass
building
fronts.
an automobile
A
using
children's
his
play
gas
area
engine.
stood near the food court.
Instead of simply
silent
adding a
and still.
motor to a carriage,
The colorful
Carl
plastic
built the
toys
carriage
looking strange
around
and
the
lifeless
motor,
under the
and
dim
using similar
emergency
technology
lights.
to that of a bicycle.
Farther down,
he constructed
I
what
could make
many
out the
consider
escalators,
to be the first
still
true
and
automobile
frozen in their usual
in
ascent,
1885,
like relics
the
from a
Benz
busier time.
patent Motorwagen.
I was getting
This
used to the
two-seater
silence
vehicle
when I noticed
ran
something
on three
strange
wire
in one
wheels,
of the clothing stores.
forming a tricycle, and was
The store
powered
door
by a
was wide
gasoline
open.
four-stroke
I stopped,
motor.
my
Its
flashlight
one-cylinder
sweeping over the
engine
darkened
produced
interior.
2/3 of the horsepower
I couldn't see anything
and could
out of
go
place at
around
first,
7 miles
but
per
as I
hour.
moved the beam around
Benz
the store,
knew this was
I noticed movement
revolutionary,
in my peripheral
and after
vision,
testing
a
and
slight
refining his
shift,
vehicle,
like something or
he
someone
drove
was
his
hiding in the
hypercar
dark.
out to the public in
I
the
turned my
summer
head to
of
look directly at it, but there was
1886.
nothing.
However,
Just
he
a few
received
mannequins
mixed
standing
reviews
near
from
the back,
critics.
as
While
motionless
some
as always.
admired his creation,
I sighed
most
and
people
shook
were
my head.
skeptical about the machine,
It was nothing.
and many didn't want him
Just
to
my
drive
nerves.
around on the main streets
I wasn't going to
for
let that
fear
janitor's
the vehicle
creepy
might
list get into
explode.
my head.
Others were even convinced
Then I
that
heard it.
Benz was the devil
The
driving
faint sound
an
of
infernal
clothing rustling.
carriage. Carl's
My
business
flashlight
partners
flicked back
weren't too
toward the
happy about
mannequins,
it either.
and there it was.
His obsession
One
with
of
the
them had
automobile
definitely
kept him
moved.
away from his
It
work,
was standing
and
a
he
little
couldn't
closer
see
now,
how his invention
slightly out
could
of
be of
position
use.
compared to the others.
Why would anyone
I could
buy
feel my
such a
heartbeat
machine?
start to quicken.
They argued. It's
"Hey,
no
Mr.
quicker than
Janitor,"
a horse.
I
It
called
can
out,
break down easily,
more out of
and
frustration
it can
than
run out
anything
of
else.
fuel.
This had to be some kind of
Nevertheless,
prank.
Carl Benz was
He was
convinced
probably
that
watching
his
me from the
horseless
shadows,
carriage
trying
was
to
the
freak me
future,
out.
and began manufacturing
no
cars
answer.
for sale in
Just the soft,
1888. The
unsettling
first
shuffle
person
of
in the
fabric
world
behind me
to do
again.
so.
I
His
turned
biggest
slowly,
supporter was his
my
wife,
flashlight
who would
scanning the
often stay
mannequins,
with her husband
and
in
that's
the
when I
workshop,
saw it.
offering him
One
new
of them had
suggestions.
changed positions again.
But even after
its head
adding
now
improvements,
facing directly
people
toward the
still
exit.
couldn't see Carl's vision.
My breath hitched
On the
in my
other
throat.
hand, the few people
No one
who
else was
bought the
here.
Cobbs
There was
could
no
only
way this
use
was a
them to
trick.
cover short distances.
I backed out of
and
the
even
store
with
quickly.
that, they needed
I didn't want
mechanics
to
to be
stay any
with
longer
them
than
at all
necessary.
times.
As I walked
It also
away,
didn't help
I kept
that they were
glancing
very
over my shoulder.
expensive, leaving them only
then I heard
accessible
it.
to the rich
Footsteps.
and their elite. And
But
even
not
many
normal
members of the
footsteps.
so-called elite
They were heavy,
didn't fancy
rough,
them
like
because they were
wood or
so
plastic
lavish
scraping
and
against the
messy.
floor.
With that
My
being
heart
said,
started pounding in
one
my
thing was
chest.
clear.
I turned
Carl
around,
needed
and
to
there it
convince
was,
the world
the same
that the
mannequin from the
automobile
store.
was here to stay.
It stood in the middle of the hallway, staring at me with its blank, lifeless face. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I watched it.
One morning,
Slowly,
in the summer of
stiffly,
1888,
it started to
Bertha
move
Venz
toward
got
me,
up very
its
early
joints
while
creaking
Carl
and
was
groaning
still in
with every
bed
step.
and hopped into her
Its
husband's
movements were
car to
robotic,
embark on one of the
stiff,
most important
like a doll
journeys
being
in
dragged
automobile
forward.
history.
I did what
She
any
brought
sane
along her
person
2
would do.
sons
I
and
ran.
set out to visit her mother
I turned on
in
my heel
Forsyth,
and bolted
which
down
was
the hallway,
66
my
miles away
footsteps
from
echoing in the
Mannheim.
vast emptiness
Bertha
of the mall.
didn't inform her husband
I didn't
nor the
care how
police
ridiculous
about
I
her
looked.
plans.
I
Most
just
likely
needed to get away
because
from
if
that
they
thing.
knew, they wouldn't let her go.
I rounded the corner,
At the time,
ducking
no
into the
car
hallway
or
that led
motorized
toward the
carriage
restrooms.
had ever courteously
The
attempted a
footsteps
journey
behind
that
me
well,
had stopped,
but she was
but I didn't dare
determined
look
to
back.
prove the
I
importance
burst
of
into the
Bez's
restroom,
invention.
splashing cold
However,
water on my
her
face,
trip was
trying
no
to convince
walk in the
myself
park.
that it was all in
Bertha
my head.
encountered many
But
problems
as I looked
along
into
the
the
way
mirror,
by
I saw
crossing
something
dusty
else.
and stony
A
roads
woman
that
was
were made
standing
for
near the
horses,
stalls,
having
her
to
back
stop
to
by
me,
a pharmacy to
dressed
get
in the
more
plain
gas,
uniform of
and
a
even
cleaning
having to
lady.
perform a few
I
mechanical
blinked,
repairs.
and she was gone.
The 66-mile
My heart
trip
skipped a
took
beat.
Bertha and her
I
2
spun
sons
around,
over 12
there was no one
pounds,
there.
but eventually
The
they
restroom
all
was
made
empty.
it safely to Forsyth.
I collapsed to my knees,
More than anything,
exhausted
the
and
trip
terrified.
achieved the goal Bertha
What
had
was
set
happening?
out to achieve,
I
to
tried to
make
gather
people
my
notice
thoughts,
that the
to make
automobile
sense of
was
it
the
all,
next big
but
thing.
nothing was adding up.
With this, the
Then I
Benz
remembered the
Motorwagen
list.
became the talk of the
I pulled
town
the crumpled
and
paper
received
from
great
my
publicity
pocket
for
and
Carl's
unfolded
business.
it with shaking hands.
Soon enough, Benz
There,
and
written
C
plainly
began
in
to
black
expand
ink,
quickly,
were the next few
so much
rules.
so
Rule
that by
3.
1890, it
If
had
a mannequin
become the
looks like it's
second largest
following you,
engine
don't look
manufacturer
back.
in Germany.
Mannequins
Though
sometimes
not by
follow
selling their
guards,
cars,
but if you
but
ignore
rather
them,
their
they'll
stationary gasoline
If you
engines.
look, they'll
But
know
with
you're
the
aware,
addition of 2
and they'll
new
get
business
closer.
partners, Friedrich von
I felt
Fischer
my
and
heart
Julius
sink.
Gavs,
I
they would
had
soon
looked.
help to turn this around.
Rule 4.
As they took
Avoid
care of the
looking into
business
the
and
mirrors of the
marketing side of
restroom.
things,
Too late for
Benz
that.
could focus more on his
My stomach
engineering
twisted
goals
in knots
and
as
was
I
able to
realized I had
patent
already
several
broken
new
2 of the
car
rules.
innovations,
Whatever was
such as the
happening, I
planetary
was
gear
making it worse.
transmission, the double pivot steering, and the flat engine
Rule
with
5.
a boxer configuration.
If you hear someone
He
talking
also
inside an
designed and
abandoned store,
manufactured a
do
new
not
and
listen.
improved automobile
I
at the
swallowed
recommendation
hard.
of his business
I hadn't heard
partners,
anyone
which
yet,
hit the
but just
market
knowing
in
the rule had there made me
1893.
uneasy.
He called it the Benz
Rule
Victoria.
6.
This
If you
was
hear
a
a
more
child laughing
luxurious
from the play
2-passenger
area,
vehicle
leave
that
immediately.
came with a 3-horsepower
Rule 7.
engine
If
capable
you
of
check the
reaching
time and it's
11
earlier
miles
than the
per
last
hour.
time you looked,
Thanks to its
immediately return to the
reliability,
security
the vehicle
office.
sold fairly well.
I glanced
but
at
it
my
was its
watch,
follow-up design,
instinctively
the
checking the
cheaper
time.
Venice Velo,
It read
that really took
11:30
off.
p.m.
With a total production
My blood
sum
ran
of about
cold.
1,200 units,
There was no way it was
the Benz
11:30.
Velo became the
I had
world's
started my
first
patrol after
large-scale
midnight,
production
and it had been a
car
while
in
since then.
history, making
This
Benz
wasn't
and C
possible.
the
I
largest
didn't need to be
automobile
told
company
twice.
in the world during the
I rushed out of the
1890s
restroom,
and early
my heart
1900s.
racing as I made my way back
However,
toward the
while
security
the Benz
office.
company was enjoying its
The
newfound
air around
success,
me seemed
it
heavier
was
now,
also feeling
more
a lot of
oppressive,
pressure
and the
from
lights
another
overhead
company
flickered
that was
faintly.
stationed not too
The
far
mall,
away.
once a place
Daimler
I had thought
Motor
would be
in
quiet and
Gesellschaft.
safe, now felt like a living entity, watching and waiting. I reached
Now,
the
before
office,
we go on
slamming
to
the
the
door
next
behind
chapter,
me. My breathing was ragged, my nerves frayed. I checked my watch again. It was almost 1 a.m. That seemed right. But what had
Daimler
happened
Motor
earlier?
in Gesellschaft
Why
was
had the time
headed by
changed like
Gottlieb
that?
Daimler and
I
Wilhelm
sat
Maybach.
down trying to steady
Both
my
were
shaking
brilliant
hands.
engineers,
I needed to
but
keep my
Gottlieb
head on
Daimler
straight.
in particular
I wasn't
was
going to
known
let this
for being
place
very
get to me.
competitive and had a
I
lot
pulled
of
out the list
connections
again,
and knowledge
reading
of
through
how
the
to run a
remaining
business. Knowledge that
Rule
Carl
8.
Benz seemed to
Lock the
lack.
security office door
The
between
first
4
Daimler
a.m.
car
and
to be sold
4:30 a.m.
commercially
and do not
appeared
open
in
it for anyone.
1892.
If they
2
knock,
years later,
they might not
they
be the
followed
person
up
you
with a
think they are.
2-cylinder car,
Check the
and in
cameras to
1897, they introduced
Rule
their
9.
first front-engine model,
If you hear
the
someone
Daimler
crying in a
Phoenix.
dressing room, do
It was
not
clear
open the
that the
door.
Daimler company was
Rule
catching
10.
up to Benz
If
as
you
their
hear an
vehicles
escalator
looked more
running,
appealing
do
and
not
comfortable for the
investigate.
public.
Watch
Mr.
the
Daimler,
area on the security
unfortunately,
cameras.
passed away in
Rule
1900,
11.
leaving Maybach
Under no
in charge of the
circumstances
company.
should you leave
But it
before
was
your
under
shift
Maybach's
ends.
control
If
that
you
he
do,
designed his
you
crowning
risk something
achievement,
following you
the
outside the mall.
Mercedes 35
I
horsepower
let out a nervous
in
laugh.
1901.
What kind of job
What
had
makes
I
this
taken?
vehicle so
Who had
special
written
is
these
that it was the
rules?
first Bonnmobile
I couldn't
to
make sense of
resemble
any
our
of it.
modern idea
But
of
as
a
I
car.
sat there, the weight
It was
of everything
equipped
that
with
had
a powerful
happened
gas
pressed down
engine.
on me.
The body was
The
wider
mannequin,
and
the
larger,
time
but
shifting,
the tailored steel
the figure
chassis
in the mirror.
and its center mast was near
This
the ground.
wasn't normal.
Initially built
Whatever
for
was
racing,
going on,
this vehicle was made
I needed
at the
to
request
survive the
of a
night.
wealthy business,
It was
Emil
past 1
Jelinek,
a.m.,
who
and I
decided to
needed
name
to
the
go for
car
another
after his
round.
daughter, Mercedes.
As much as I wanted to
This
stay
car
locked in the
would go on
security
to win
office,
multiple
I
street
knew I had to
races
follow
and
the
pro
security
climb
protocols
events,
also.
going at a top
The
speed
cameras
of
showed nothing
56
unusual,
miles per hour,
so I gathered my
superior
courage
to
and
any other
stepped back
vehicle
out
of
into
its
the mall.
day. This drew a lot of
As I
attention
walked
to the Daimler
cautiously through the
company,
main hallway,
who decided
I
to
started hearing
rebrand all their
something.
vehicles to
A faint
Mercedes
mumbling
and
coming from
began
an
producing
abandoned
new
store.
models for racing
My blood
and
ran
public
cold
use
as I
under the
remembered
same
Rule
name.
5.
On the flip side, however,
stopped in my
this new
tracks,
trend
heart
didn't sit
pounding in
well
my
for
chest.
Carl Benz's partners,
The mumbling
who
sound
wanted
coming
an
from the
immediate
abandoned store was quiet, barely audible over the faint hum of the mall's air conditioning. But it was unmistakable. There was someone or something talking inside. I forced myself to move, my legs feeling like lead. Rule 5 echoed in my head. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned store, do not listen. I tried to block out the sound, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the soft, incomprehensible murmurs persisted, growing louder the closer I got to the store. I glanced at the glass storefront. The windows were covered with paper, blocking any view of the inside. My breath hitched as I quickened my pace, refusing to even glance in its direction. I didn't want to know what was behind those papers or what was causing that sound. The voice was rising now, clearer but still distorted, like someone talking underwater. I had to get away. I made it past the store, refusing to look back. The voice began to fade, and I felt the tension in my body ease slightly. But as I turned the corner and entered the next corridor, I heard it again. Footsteps. But not normal footsteps. They were rough, uneven, like the dragging sound of something solid scraping against the floor, almost like wood or plastic. My stomach twisted. I knew what it was before I even turned around. It was the mannequin. My instinct screamed at me not to look back, remembering Rule 3. If a mannequin looks like it's following you, don't look back. If you ignore them, they'll stop. If you look, they'll know you're aware, and they'll get closer. I walked faster, keeping my eyes straight ahead, trying to ignore the growing sound of the mannequin's movements behind me. Each step it took seemed heavier, more deliberate. My heart raced as the footsteps grew closer, but I didn't dare turn around. Just keep walking. Just keep walking, I told myself. The sound of the mannequin's movement grew fainter, and eventually I could no longer hear it. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and slowed my pace. My hands were shaking, but at least I had followed the rule. Whatever was following me had stopped for now. Then I heard something else. The distant hum of machinery. An escalator. Running. I froze, the blood draining from my face. Rule 10. If you hear an escalator running, do not investigate. Watch the area on the security cameras. I turned on my heel and bolted for the security office. I wasn't going to risk breaking another rule, especially after what I had just been through. My mind raced as I rushed back down the hallway, past the now quiet abandoned store, and toward the safety of the security office. I could hear the escalator in the distance, that unmistakable mechanical whir, but I didn't stop. I burst into the office, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I immediately turned my attention to the security monitors, flipping through the camera feeds. The escalator camera came into view, and there it was. A figure. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was something else. The figure was tall, unnaturally tall, its limbs long and spindly, its face obscured by shadows. It was standing on the escalator, its body stiff and jerky, moving in slow, unnatural movements as the steps carried it upward. I stared at the screen, frozen in place. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. The figure's head turned slowly, as if sensing something. And then, impossibly, it looked straight at the camera, straight at me. The monitors started flickering, static filling the screens, a loud buzzing sound filling the room. I snapped my gaze away from the camera, remembering Rule 1. Don't stare at the footage for too long. The buzzing stopped almost immediately, and when I glanced back at the monitors, the escalator was empty. The figure was gone. I sat back in my chair, my body trembling. I couldn't do this anymore. My nerves were shot, and the rules, those damned rules, were starting to feel like a cruel game designed to break me. I just had to make it through the night. Just a few more hours, I told myself. The next hours passed in silence. I stayed in the security office, too shaken to do another round. I kept glancing at the monitors, watching the empty hallways, the still stores, the escalator that remained motionless now. Everything seemed calm, but the air in the office was thick with tension. Then, I heard something that sent a cold wave of dread down my spine. A knock at the door. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. I froze, my eyes darting toward the security
monitors to check the hallway outside the office.
There was
no
no
one there.
But the knock came again. Three sharp raps against the door, as if someone was standing just outside. And then I heard a voice. Hey,
how's the night going?
Still think the rules are funny? It was the
janitor.
Or at least it sounded like him. I
I swallowed hard,
remembering
Rule 8.
Lock the security office door between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. and do not open it for anyone. If they knock, they might not be the person you think they are. Check the cameras to confirm. I glanced at the clock. It was 4:03 a.m. My heart pounded in my chest as I checked the camera feed again. The hallway outside the office was completely empty, but the knocking continued, more insistent this time. The janitor's voice echoed through the door, sounding friendly but somehow off. Come on, open
up.
I'll tell you what's really going on here. I stood frozen, my hand hovering near the door handle. My mind raced. It sounded like the janitor, but I knew better than to trust my instincts at this point. I checked the camera again. Still nothing. The hallway was empty. I couldn't open the door. I wouldn't. The knocking stopped suddenly. Silence filled the office again, and I let out a shaky breath. I kept watching the camera, not daring to move until finally the janitor appeared on the screen. He was standing right outside the door now, staring straight into the camera. He knocked again. His face twisted into an eerie grin. I felt my stomach drop. The way he stared into the camera. It didn't seem human. His body started to waver, like he was made of smoke. And then, slowly, he dissipated into the air, leaving nothing but an empty hallway. I checked the clock. 4:30 a.m. Whatever it had been, it was gone now. For the first time in hours, the air felt still. The oppressive weight that had been hanging over me seemed to lift, if only a little. I could feel the tension easing from my shoulders, though my body still felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. I stood up, my muscles aching from being hunched over the monitors for so long. I needed to stretch my legs to move around, if only to shake off the lingering dread that clung to me like a shadow. After everything that had happened, I wasn't keen on doing another full patrol. But staying in the office felt stifling. Maybe a short walk just around the immediate area of the office would help clear my head. The mall was still deathly quiet. The faint hum of electricity, the only sound that echoed through the corridors. The fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to shift as I walked. I kept my eyes down, trying not to focus on the mannequins, the stores, or the eerie silence that had settled over everything. As I rounded the corner near the security office, I nearly jumped out of my skin. The janitor was standing there, leaning casually against the wall with that same friendly grin he'd had the first time we met. It was the real janitor this time, at least. I hoped it was. He seemed more human, more tangible than the strange apparition I'd seen earlier in the night. Rough night? He asked, his voice light, almost teasing. I didn't know how to respond. I stood there, my mind racing as I tried to reconcile what I had seen earlier. The knocks, the figure dissolving into mist, with the man standing in front of me now. You could say that, I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, his grin fading slightly. You followed the rules, didn't you? I tried. I said, my throat dry. What is this place? Why are these rules even a thing? The janitor let out a low chuckle, but it wasn't the friendly, warm sound it had been earlier in the night. This laugh was hollow, tinged with something darker. I told you the rules are there to keep you safe, he said, his eyes narrowing. There's more going on here than you understand. Much more. I took a step back, my unease growing with every word he spoke. What do you mean? What's going on in this mall? He shrugged, the grin returning to his face. You'll figure it out, or maybe you won't. Either way, there was no escaping it. He started to walk away, turning down the dimly lit corridor without another word. His movements were slow, deliberate, like he wasn't in any rush to leave. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what he was talking about. I needed answers. Wait!
Wait!
I called
after him,
my voice echoing down the empty hallway. What do you mean, no escaping it? What are you trying to say? The janitor didn't stop. He kept walking, his footsteps eerily quiet against the tiled floor. Desperation and frustration bubbled up inside me. And before I knew it, I was following him, determined to get some kind of explanation. I rounded the corner after him, but when I got there, the hallway was empty. He was gone. Again. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, staring down the empty corridor. There was no way he could have disappeared so quickly. He had just been there. I looked around, scanning the area for any sign of him. But the mall had fallen back into its eerie silence. And then I heard it. A soft, muffled crying. The sound was faint at first, almost too quiet to notice. But as I stood there, frozen in place, it grew louder, more distinct. A woman's voice, sobbing quietly, somewhere nearby. My skin prickled with unease. I knew the rules. I had them memorized by now, and I knew exactly what this was. Rule 9. If you hear someone crying in a dressing room, do not open the door. I swallowed hard, trying to block out the sound, but the crying persisted. It seemed to be coming from one of the stores up ahead. The muffled sobs echoing faintly through the deserted hallways. Every instinct I had was telling me to walk away, to get back to the office, and wait out the last hour of my shift in silence. But there was something about the crying that pulled me toward it, an almost magnetic force that made it impossible to ignore. What if someone really needed help? What if this was all in my head? What if the rules were just some sick jokes? I shook my head trying to clear my thoughts. I had already broken too many of the rules tonight. This wasn't a joke. The janitor had warned me, and I wasn't about to ignore him now. But still, the crying continued. It was louder now, more insistent. The sound echoing from somewhere deeper in the store just ahead of me. It didn't sound right. It was too hollow, too distorted, like a recording of someone crying rather than an actual person. I stood there, torn between curiosity and fear, until finally the decision was made for me. The crying stopped. Suddenly, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the walls of the mall were closing in on me. My chest tightened, and I realized I had been holding my breath. Then slowly, a figure appeared on one of the security cameras I had been monitoring through the corridor. I had left the office, but the cameras were still connected to my device. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen as I saw her. A woman, pale, with long dark hair that hung limply over her face, obscuring her features. She was dressed in plain, outdated clothing. Her body hunched over as she moved slowly down the hallway, her feet barely touching the ground. She was floating. My heart leapt into my throat as I watched her approach the dressing room. Her body drifting closer to the entrance, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She hovered just outside the door, as if waiting for me to follow her inside. I took a step back, my pulse racing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I had seen things tonight, strange things, but this was something else entirely. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the figure to disappear, to leave me alone. When I opened them, she was gone. But the crying had started again, this time, right behind me. I didn't think. I bolted down the hallway, running as fast as my legs would carry me. The sound of the woman's cries echoed through the halls, growing louder and more desperate with every step I took. I didn't dare look back, didn't dare risk another glance. All I knew was that I needed to get out of there, now. By the time I reached the security office, I was breathless, my entire body trembling with fear. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it as quickly as I could, and collapsed into the chair in front of the monitors. My chest heaved with each breath, the adrenaline still coursing through me. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal, with no way out but the faint hope that my shift would end soon. I glanced at the monitors. My heart sank. There she was, the woman. The same pale figure, her hair hanging limply over her face, moving in that unnatural, hovering way. She was no longer just roaming the halls. She was headed directly toward the security office. My blood ran cold as I watched her on the monitors. She floated down the hallway, closer and closer. Her slow, jerky movements unnerving. She didn't walk like a normal person. She barely moved her feet at all, gliding just above the ground. The sobbing was gone, but the weight of her presence was suffocating. It was as if the very air around her distorted with her approach, bending reality itself. I checked the camera feeds desperately, flipping between angles. She was getting closer. My breath quickened as I watched her drift past the closed stores, her face obscured by her hair, her arms limp at her sides. Every second she got nearer, and I felt my panic rising, clawing at my throat. I reached for the list of rules, gripping it tightly in my trembling hands. Don't open the door. I repeated the thought over and over in my head, like a mantra. Don't open the door no matter what. The woman stopped just outside the security office. I could see her now on the monitor. The camera trained right on the door. She stood there, silent and still, like a statue. For a moment, I dared to hope that she would leave, that maybe she'd fade away like a bad dream. But then the knocking started. Soft at first, barely a tap. But each knock grew louder, more forceful, until it felt like the entire door was rattling. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. She was there, just inches away on the other side, and I could feel her presence like a cold weight pressing down on me. I checked the monitor again, praying she would vanish, but she didn't. Her body was rigid, unmoving, but the knocking continued, growing louder and more violent with each passing second. The door frame shook as if it wouldn't hold much longer. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, trying to block her out. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the knocking only grew more intense, more insistent, like someone pounding with their fists. My heart raced, my body trembling as I stared at the door, unable to move. Then I heard it. Hey, open up. It's the manager. I froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It was Mr. Hensley. But something felt wrong. I checked the clock. My heart thundering in my chest. 6:01 a.m. Relief washed over me, but suspicion crept in immediately. Was it really him? Or was this another trick? I checked the camera one last time. The woman was gone. No sign of the pale figure. No shadow. No presence. Everything okay in there? Mr. Hensley's voice called again, sounding closer now, more concerned. Open up. Your shift's over. I hesitated. My hand hovering over the door handle. I had survived the night, hadn't I? The clock showed it was past 6 a.m. and nothing had come for me in those final moments. But the events of the night had shaken me to the core, and I wasn't ready to trust anyone without checking one last time. I glanced at the monitor one last time, double-checking the feed outside the office. And there he was, Mr. Hensley, standing just outside the door, looking exactly as he had when I first met him. No eerie figure, no distorted face. Just him, the manager. With a trembling hand, I unlocked the door and opened it. Mr. Hensley stood there, his expression softening as he saw the look on my face. Rough night, huh? He asked, his voice filled with concern. I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. Yeah. You could say that. He frowned, noticing the look of fear etched across my face. You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I laughed bitterly under my breath. Something like that. I didn't go into detail. I didn't tell him about the mannequin or the crying woman. It didn't seem real anymore. I was just happy the night was over. But something gnawed at me. Something that I needed to know before I left this place for good. What about the janitor? I asked suddenly. The one who works the night shift? Mr. Hensley looked at me, puzzled. What janitor? My stomach dropped. The one who was here all night. He gave me a list of rules to follow. Mr. Hensley shook his head, his expression turning serious. There's no night janitor. No one works here at night except you. My mind reeled. The pieces didn't fit together. None of it made sense. I stared at Mr. Hensley, my thoughts racing. If there was,
If
no,
there was
janitor,
no janitor,
then who or what had been warning me? And the rules. Where had they come from? I didn't ask any more questions. I handed him my keys, quit on the spot, and walked out of the mall without looking back. Whatever had happened there, whatever lurked in the dark corners of that place, I wasn't going to stick around to find out more. As I drove away, the weight of the night still heavy on my chest, I realized that some places are better left alone. And that mall, it was one of them. I will never return to that place again.
Like the bike butter, but the light the third term. Like fick den enkla den prep, the prekium. Like taburik, I think he but the ferric, the camperik, and funimir, the firearm.